All right. Good evening, everybody. I do think we are live tonight. Brother Boswell, I'm going to go ahead and throw it over to you.
Hey, how y'all doing today? Hey man, we're here once again. Hey man, during the month of Black History. We have a awesome person we're going to introduce today, man. A pioneer during a time for women that it just wasn't available to be doing so, and she broke some barriers down and created a way for people to do some great things. And man, I can't wait to hear her story. I hope you guys are tuned in. As always, guys, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube, follow us on our Facebook page, Omega Chi of Omega Sci-Fi Incorporated, and tune in to our awesome interviews for Black History Month. We're going to go all the way through to Jubilee till we get this done. And if you know someone that has a spectacular story, don't hesitate to send them our way. Appreciate it and thank you. Enjoy the interview.
That's right. Right. Yes, absolutely. And so, once again, we're so excited to have an amazing guest with us tonight. She is so many things to so many people, but I think to me, she's a little like family. And we're just excited to just be able to converse with her tonight. Judge Pettway, how are you?
Very, very well. Thank you. And you?
Oh, I'm doing pretty well. I'm doing pretty
Good.
well. Listen, thank you so much just for taking the time to speak with us on tonight. We thoroughly appreciate it, and we're excited to definitely get into this conversation with you. One of the first things, if you don't mind, just to sort of kind of kick things off, can you tell us a little bit about who you are?
Oh, that's an easy one. I am Linda and Joseph's daughter, very proudly. I am Joseph's sister, Adam's mother, Joy's mother, Antoine's aunt, and one of the happiest campers alive because I've been fortunate to have very good family, excellent parents, and a support system unlike any other I've ever known. So I sit here, and when I stand in thankfulness for the multitude of blessings God has given me.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. Listen, and I know you've definitely done so much. And before we even sort of get into that, one of the things I always ask so many figures that we talk to, because this day and age now we live in such a polarizing society, but considering the barriers you broke when you growing up, can you talk about what that was like growing up in rural Wilcox County just as a young girl, and compared to how things are now?
Surely, I remember as a 4-year-old going to school at the Jackson Highway School, which is really in Safford. And we had one large room with a partition that divided it into two parts. On one side, you had the first through the fourth grades. On the other side, you had the fifth through the eighth grades. And we had two teachers, no indoor plumbing, no water fountains, no hot lunches, just a bunch of wonderful children aspiring to be something in life, and some wonderful teachers who poured their all into us. We did not have the latest school books, but they made us believe in ourselves. And they made us believe that we could be anything we wanted to be. And that was 1958. And they're telling us that was probably just their desires and what they wanted for us, because as they live as adults and we live as children, the world was not favorable for us to be anything we desired. But the good thing about that is when I left that school and I was not enrolled in the first grade, my mom just let me go, and the teachers knew my mother. They just let me come every day, and I did the work. So when I went to my next school, I went to the second grade because I had done the first grade work. And back in those days, you didn't have to have a report card. You just showed up and said who you were and moved on along. And that's what I did. And that was at Alberta Elementary School. But the thing about the Jackson Highway School was Mrs. Carter, her husband was Lawrence Carter. They lived in Beloit. And she later moved to Martin Station Elementary School once Martin Station was built. And she was the third grade teacher there. She had a very powerful persona. She was a powerful looking woman, but she had so much concern and care and love in her heart for her children that we saw her not just as a teacher, but a mother figure also. She was our encourager. When we were wounded, she took care of our wounds. And more than anything else, when I left there, I truly believed that the world was my oyster and I could do whatever I wanted to do. And it wasn't until I was retiring as district judge that I realized that I was not extraordinary as I had thought all my life. That I actually was an ordinary person who had just had extraordinary opportunities and blessings. So the one thing I really remember about growing up pre-1965 and 68 was an incident I had when I was attending school at St. Elizabeth's in Selma. I would spend Monday night through Thursday night in Selma with relatives and ride home on the bus on Friday afternoons. And one Friday, I think it was 1962 or 63, I got on the bus and there were some seats open and I sat down probably on the fifth or sixth row. And when the bus driver got on, he told me I had to get up. And I wondered why I had to get up. And I also wondered why all the Black people didn't come to the aid of a little girl. So I stood up from Selma to my dad's store, which is a good 30 miles away. And when I got off the bus, I told my daddy what had happened. And the look in my daddy's face and his eyes lives with me to this day because it was the look of a man, a very proud man, a very hardworking man, the best daddy I could have ever had. Knowing that he was not able to protect his child from a world that was not friendly toward her. And we never actually talked about that. But knowing how proud and how wonderful he was, I knew that that struck him like nothing that had ever happened to him because it happened to the daughter that he loved more than life itself. So even with that, in our school at St. Elizabeth's with the nuns from St. Joseph Society, they taught us to believe in ourselves. They taught us that we could accomplish and do things. So we were extremely fortunate because our parents sacrificed to make sure we were in private schools and we had people around us who encouraged us and were capable to teach us. And because of that, I think we were able to succeed. And some of the people who were in school with me at St. Elizabeth's, the West daughters were there, and the Clay daughters were there. And there were some others that I can't remember their names now, but it was just a collegiate group of children who had parents who understood the importance of a good education and were willing to sacrifice for their children. Because when I graduated from high school in 1969 from Alabama Lutheran Academy, I had gone 1 year at Holy Family High School in Birmingham, my ninth grade year, and was able to stay in the dormitory at Alabama Lutheran Academy from 1966 until 69. And then I left there and went to Auburn University, which was a world unto itself. But if nothing else, I really want to just emphasize the importance of parents believing in their children and surrounding their children with a community of people who believe in them. Because in our church, when we would do our little programs at Easter and Christmas and Mother's Day and other special days, there were always the little old ladies with the handkerchiefs and the pretty hats telling us, "You did good, baby. You're going to be somebody." And when you hear that often enough, you internalize it and you believe it, and it helps you get through obstacles that otherwise you probably would not get through. So having a really good foundation at home, at school, in our church, in our community really set me up for success. And I knew that if I had not done well, it would not have been anybody's fault but mine because everyone poured whatever they had into me. Sometimes one of the little old ladies would have a handkerchief, and in the corner she would have maybe 2 quarters and a dime. And she would open up the handkerchief and give it to me and say, "Take this, baby, you can use it." I was surrounded by my great grandmother on my father's side, who was the first family member on my dad's side, who was born free in America. And she was the kind of woman that did not take no for an answer. She was a woman who had her own book that she kept up with her payments that she owed people. She would go to the company store, and if she got something for $5, she wrote it down. So when it came time to settle up, if the white man had a different number, she was strong enough and bold enough to say, "No, that's not what I owe, and this is how much I'm going to pay you." So she gave me an example of what strength was about, in addition to my parents. I had great aunts who were around me. One great aunt that I used to call my grandmother because our grandmother died when our dad was 6 months old in 1918. She divorced her husband in her 60s and had the strength to start a life all over without him. And the only reason she had gotten married was her younger sister had gotten with child, that's what they called it back in the 20s, and had been forced to get married. And my aunt, Mama Ann, didn't want the same thing to happen to her, so she married to a man that she probably didn't love, but didn't have any other choice in those early 1900s. So if there has been success, and we thank God for the success we've had, it's because of loving, sacrificial, supportive parents and a community around me that believed in me and made me believe in myself.
That's awesome. Listen, I was so locked in um, when you started, especially the stories about um, what it was like for you, and just to see how that family and that village has definitely surrounded you. I think that speaks highly of just growing up in the Black Belt in the South period. That's one of the things I've found in common that everyone has spoken about coming in, that we've spoken to, is they speak about that village and that family. Um,
Hmm.
and so,
Yes.
you know, I think it really resonates a lot, you know.
It's important, and that is where we have lost so much in the last 30 or 40 years. And at some point, we got to turn it around
Hmm.
because a parent can't do it by him or herself. Even in a two-parent home, my parents would not have been able to do it by themselves. My dad worked on the railroad, and my parents had a business. And at times, my dad had 4 or 5 jobs. He would come home on Fridays from the railroad. He had cows, he had a farm, he had chickens, he had hogs. And when he was
Real
on the
happy day.
railroad, my mom and I had to feed the cows. And I remember going to the pasture and my mom driving the truck, and I was on the back of the truck throwing hay out. Those days we had those rectangular bales. We didn't have the big
Mhm.
round bales like they have now. But it was a family effort. And when my daddy had a cotton field, I was in the cotton field picking cotton. I couldn't do that much, but I knew that it was part of what I had to do as part of a family.
Right.
And and my grandmother stayed with us until my dad built her house, and she was our matriarch, and would lead prayer. We prayed around the breakfast table, we prayed around the dinner table, and that was a good thing for us also.
Mm.
Yeah.
That's
That's definitely
wonderful.
something to hear about. Like just sitting here and hearing your story, and I have daughters. I have nothing but daughters, so I don't know what it feels like to be a father for a young man. Um, I felt that love, that love that you talked about for your that your father has for you, because I definitely love mine to death. And anytime, they come to me with a story or someone has wronged them, it definitely puts a damper on my
Mm-hmm.
spirit. So I,
Mm-hmm.
I, I was definitely in tune. Like I was like, okay, yeah, yeah, I know that feeling, but it's definitely good to know that those were the things that drove you to actually try to make a better world around you and for others, and that's definitely so important. And to hear the community, you're right. Community and family is definitely not what it used to be. So I think if we can get back to that, we could definitely start saving a few lives in this world that we live in.
I think you're absolutely right, because people need to realize that we are interdependent on each other.
Hmm.
And let me just tell you one thing about my dad. My dad was not a wussy. My daddy was a man's man. He was the kind who did not back up. He was a man of integrity, of courage. And one night at our store, the Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan, Robert Shelton from Tuscaloosa, came in. He and my dad had some words. He told my dad, "I'll be back." And my dad said, "I'll be here."
This was the Grand Wizard of the Ku
Of
Klux
the
Klan.
Robert Shelton from Tuscaloosa, the Grand Dragon of the Ku Klux Klan. And Daddy meant what he said.
I'll
And
be here.
sure enough, a couple nights later, there was a cross burning in our yard, and that happened to be the night Daddy was on the railroad, so he wasn't there to do what he was supposed to do to it. But Daddy was one of the attendees at the first mass meeting at Tabernacle Baptist Church,
Okay.
and he put his money where his mouth was. When B&P, the black grocery store, was trying to be formed, Daddy put his money in that. He put his money in the black credit union. He put his money in the black furniture store. We went to the Reed Pharmacy. That was our pharmacist. Our doctors were Dr. Jenkins, and our dentist was Dr. Jackson. And later on, our pharmacist was Mr. Christopher. He believed in black entrepreneurship because he had a business. And so often black people didn't support him, because one lady told my mom once, "Did you make this cake with your flour? I didn't know your flour could make good cakes." Like, duh, we all get the flour from the same distributor. Why wouldn't my flour make good cakes?
Right.
So we still have to overcome the fact that black people don't believe in each other. The
Wow.
white man's ice is still colder, and his beer is still more intoxicating. And that's something we have to teach our children also.
You said something then, like I think they breath smell better too.
Oh, yeah.
If you
Oh,
let
and don't forget their poop. Their poop probably doesn't even stink.
but like there's definitely, I think even in the world we live in now, those are still challenges we
Mm-hmm.
face. They're
Mm-hmm.
different. Just like we were talking with some other interviewers, you knew who your enemies were then. It's like now you really
Mm-hmm.
don't know,
Mm-hmm.
even in your
Yeah.
own
Yeah.
race. Even your own
Yeah.
race now, so you don't know who to. You're like, golly, like bro, we supposed to be
Mm-hmm.
together. But, hey, that, and it and
Yeah.
it happens that way. But brother Collins, you got the floor. I'm sorry, brother.
Oh
You got it.
no, no, listen. I'm actually laughing because I think my internet started kind of get a little crazy on my side. So if y'all didn't see it, that means it was fine.
You're
Yeah,
But
yeah.
good.
I think I'm back. No, listen. I was actually throwing it at you for the next question, so that's why I was quiet. I had been talking the whole
I got
time.
you. Got you. We've heard a little bit about you, and your story growing up is definitely something to hear. You know, I hope you make a book one day because somebody just needs to read that or hear about that. What was the moment that sparked your career? Because I heard you say you end up. Oh, by the way, I'm a graduate of Concordia, so hey, we have something in
Yeah.
common. Yeah, so that's super big. You know, like you're the second person I've heard a story about Alabama Lutheran, but you're the first to say that you stayed in the dorm, and that
Mhm.
and I think that's kind of dope to say that you were there doing it. Right. What was the moment that sparked your career? Because I know that you're retired a judge, but what sparked your career along the way? Like, what did you do before you became a judge? Like, what came along before then?
Well, the idea about becoming a lawyer was from my daddy. My daddy would have made an excellent lawyer, but he was not able to go to school. And he always talked about, well, he and my mom both talked about the law as being a means to make our people's lives in America better. And we always had magazines and books at home. And I remember seeing Constance Baker Motley in an Ebony magazine one month. And I decided that I wanted to be a lawyer like her. And I had curves and detours, but by the grace of God, it was able to materialize. Because when I went to Auburn in 1969, we were basically the third wave of Black people to come to Auburn. When I got there, I think we had maybe 40 Black students out of a population of 16,000. And we knew every Black student's mama's name, their daddy's names, and where they were from, because we were just like a little family. And when I was at Auburn, I had instructors who called Black people niggers, negras, negresses, colored, and would say, well, I use it interchangeably. And it's not personal, but it's very difficult to sit in a classroom knowing that someone who uses that language is the one who's going to give you a grade at the end of the semester. So I remember going to the dean of the department complaining about this particular professor, Mr. Metzger, and he told me he couldn't do anything about it because he was tenured. That gave me a skewed view of tenure back in those days. But I later came to understand it. So Auburn was like a mini Hades to a certain degree. Alabama was much different than Auburn. They were still racist, but they were more sophisticated in their racism than they were at Auburn. Auburn was just raw. It was just what you had because I was there when Henry Harris, the first Black basketball player, was there, came to Auburn. And his recruiters told him, Tuskegee is 20 miles down the road. When you get ready for a girl, you need to go to Tuskegee. So Auburn was the place where they didn't play games. You knew who you were, and they checked you when you thought you were not who they thought you were. But even through that, we were able to graduate. And I think the young man who's now the Secretary of the Army was at Auburn either before or after. So I'm sure he could give a testimony about his life at Auburn too. But after that, I went to Alabama and I got a second degree in social work and a master's in social work and went to law school in 1979. So I worked as a social worker with the Department of, then it was called Pensions and Security, now it's Human Resources. And I had a supervisor there who asked me one day, do you have relatives receiving welfare? I said, no, why you ask? She said, because you're talking to people as you walk them down to your office. And I said, well, there are people like me. Why would I not talk with them? I just found it strange. So that brought another awareness to me that regardless of where you go, racism is going to be there. So when I graduated from law, because I stayed at that job 6 months, I had to go. So I went to law school at Alabama, and that we had what they call anonymous grading. They didn't have that before Black students got to Alabama Law School. But once the black students got there, they gave everybody a number. So the instructors would not know who they were grading. So we had a professor named John Payne who he did have a standard property book. He had his own materials. So he had one case where this man in 1860, this white man in 1860, had left his entire his just everything he owned to his son John. And after he died, his relatives went to court because they said his son John could not have been his son because his son John was black and his wife was white, and obviously she had had a little dalliance with someone who was not of the white persuasion. And the Supreme Court ruled in that case that obviously the deceased was mentally deranged to believe that that was his son. Now, at the time, the rule was if a child is born to your wife and you have not been missing from her for more than 10 months, the child is yours. But the Alabama Supreme Court ruled that indeed he must have been mentally deranged because that couldn't possibly be his child. So his estate was transferred from his child to his Anglo-Saxon relatives. So, that alerted me again to the fact that racism exists every place, from the Supreme Court of Alabama and the Supreme Court of the United States down to the local courts. And it was just a challenge for me to try to make a difference in our judicial system. Mr. Payne came in class one day and he said, you're white, 21, and a man. What more could you want? So I looked around and said, all of us don't fit that. So later on, he asked me to come to his office maybe a week later to apologize for what he had said. I said, Mr. Payne, you don't need to apologize. I'm going to face racism when I go to court. And as long as I practice law in Alabama, so you're just giving me a practice. And we went on from there. So I think the one thing that we have to understand and teach our children and teach the people we know is that there is no such thing as justice for us when you have a white DA and sometimes a black one, a white jury, a white judge, a white defense lawyer, and some witnesses who don't have the courage to come forward. So it's just crucial for us to support people who have our best interests at heart in the sense that they believe that everyone deserves fair treatment. And yesterday was a challenging day for me because I was watching the news and they talked about the young man in Colorado who was walking home and someone said he was acting weird and the police stopped him and the paramedics injected something into him and he died from it because he was walking down the street and nothing's been done to those people. And I was looking at the COVID reports and seeing so many people who looked like me who had died from COVID. And I realized again how medicine is just covered with racism. My mom had a problem with her knee, and we went to an orthopedic surgeon. And while we were there, I said, well, I need to get something for osteoporosis because every little lady in my church has osteoporosis. And he said, black women don't get osteoporosis. I was going, how is that true? Because a bone is a bone, and a bone doesn't know color. Well, you don't. I said, well, you need to come to my church because every woman in my church has osteoporosis over 60 years old. So in medicine, in the law, and everything else, our people need to understand that there's a difference being made when our health is concerned, where our well-being is concerned. We were watching the doctors the other week and learned that when Endocrinologists evaluate patients, they have a different score for Black people versus white people because there's a study that was done in 1999 that says Black people have more mass in our bodies. And because of that, it takes us longer to need kidney transplants, which is not true. And that's one of the reasons by the time a person who is Black is diagnosed and say you need to go to dialysis, it's almost too late for us. So we have to educate our people to let them understand that racism is still there and it's still alive. So I faced in law school, and a friend of mine who's about 6'7" told me a judge in one of the counties surrounding Wilcox told him one day to sit down when he questioned witnesses. And he asked her, why do I have to sit down? And the other lawyer is standing up. You're intimidating me just because of his height and his Blackness. She
Wow.
discriminated against him, and he had to ask his questions sitting down. So serving as a judge gave me an opportunity to actually administer justice to people. And it was always interesting because our people were not accustomed to it. I had often held court in Dallas County for Judge Walker. And one day I was doing traffic court, and the late Park Keith, who was a district attorney, he said, Judge, is it okay if we take some cases before? I said, yeah, fine. He called about 10 names. Maybe 6 were white people, and I always put white in parentheses because I think that's a legal fiction.
Hmm.
And about 4 Black people who worked for somebody white, and he wanted those cases dismissed. So I said, no problem. So when I did that, I said, everyone, I said, obviously Park has friends in the courtroom. I said, I don't know you individually, but I'm going to be your friend today. So everyone who has a traffic ticket, come on up here and get your traffic ticket dismissed so you can go on home.
Because you can't do that to the white folks and think you about to say something with these Black folks. That's right. That's right.
If we gonna get rid of traffic tickets, we're getting rid of traffic tickets. And that's what having someone of conscience does in a courtroom.
So you are actually you're dabbling into what my next question was really going to be about anyway. Believe it or not, because that's the thing I always love to hear the importance of why representation matters
Mm-hmm.
in these
Mhm.
positions. You know, especially why it was so important that we see Black people in leadership. We now have a Black woman as vice president now. You know, we've seen Black women in so many positions of power. Brother Marshall has said countless times to the women we've spoken with that 2021 is being seen as the year of the woman. And so, you know, I think that representation is so important. And
Mm-hmm.
the fact of what you just said, you know, and it always makes you wonder that will some Black people even notice that when that happens?
It's hard not to. It's hard not to. But that was the perfect storm for me because 9 times out of 10 I was gonna dismiss something anyway.
Hmm.
But that just
Mhm.
gave me just full range to do whatever without him being able to say anything. Because I had given him what he wanted and I had taken what I wanted.
Wow.
And it benefits our people. And that's the reason. And nothing was wrong with that. It wasn't illegal. Because
Mhm.
if it had been, I would have gone before the commission like I had to do at the last part of my career anyway. But
Mhm.
we have the thing we as a people must understand is when we are given an opportunity by God to level the playing field, we have to be men and women of God with strength and courage to do the right thing. Because if we don't do the right thing, we can't depend on other people to do it.
That's interesting. You know how what that lawyer, what you mentioned, how the what that lawyer did, because technically he wasn't breaking the law, and you
Right.
know, it's technically it is considered racist, but it what you can't really report it, and so it's always a fine line that you always have to sort of navigate through. You know, it's crazy. Oh my. I,
Well,
Hey,
the thing was with him, it was all his friends or people who knew his friends or people who worked
mhm.
for his friends. And he's the same one who called April. I don't know if you remember April England Albright.
I know April.
He left a message on April's phone as he was hanging the phone up. The answer machine was going. He didn't realize it. And as he was hanging the phone up, he called April ANBIT.
Mm,
So
Mm,
that's a mindset that we had in the courtroom as a prosecutor. And when you have
envy.
that mindset in a courtroom, it's going to be just us. It's
wow.
not going to be justice.
Wow.
But it happens. And that's the reason you young men and women have to go to law school and learn how to represent people and to become judges so we can have justice in America. Because until then, we're not going to have justice in America. If you look at the federal bench, how they would not appoint judges when President Obama was in office. But I think they appointed 260 judges during the term for number 45. And
Hmm.
those judges are not going to be favorable to us at all.
And
At all.
it's definitely showing now with a
Mm-hmm,
lot of these cases. There was a federal judge that put a stop to one of Biden's executive orders,
mm-hmm,
President Biden's executive orders that he
mm-hmm,
put in. So
mm-hmm,
we're gonna be feeling these repercussions for the longest time, and
mm-hmm.
that goes back to why we have to have proper representation.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah, that's it.
in these
Yes.
spaces.
You're right because people just don't understand how quickly things happen in a courtroom. And as you said earlier, sometimes if you are not attuned to what's going on,
Hmm.
it will totally slip by you.
Right,
So you have to keep your antenna up at all times because it's there. It's there.
right,
It's there.
right. Bro Boswell, I'm gonna
Um,
throw the next question to you.
gotcha. I think for the most part, just I think we've been under an umbrella that we've never been able to let down, and it's like a lock on it, like the little lever, like we can't let it down to let that sun shine on us. It's like we're stuck on an umbrella and there's so much rain, but at
That's it.
some point of our lives, it's some sunlight somewhere, but somebody has that lock on that umbrella and we won't release it. And it's starting to kind of release. We just won Georgia. We've got another African American woman in the White House. We've seen the most black mayors in the past 10 years than we've seen in the past 500 years. So it's happening, but it seems like soon we take 5, somebody else has 10 steps ahead of us. But I think we're breaking more barriers now than we've done in a long time. And like you said, we have to become more lawyers. We have to become more teachers. We have to be more mayors. We have to be
Mm-hmm.
more politicians. And we have to push our students. And as for me as a classroom teacher, we have to push our students to be more active. And that there's nothing wrong with being a welder. There's nothing wrong with being a plumber, but there are some careers that we need our young black men and women to be in, and it causes us to be more sufficient in this society. Because if we keep letting Dad's a lawyer. Dan sent all 5 of his white children to school to be a lawyer, and we sending our children to go do other things or not really looking into fields that we think beneficial for our community in the long run. And that's what we got to do. And it goes back to that community statement you made.
Stop
I've
bringing in
had
the
some white,
slave.
yeah, and they will give their generational wealth down to their children, so they'll have. We have to stop being envious of our family members and knowing that if we can stick
Mm-hmm.
together and we can build the support system within our family, then when we send them out to branch out into the world, they'll come back into the community and build it up the way that it needs to be done. And I think once we get to that point, we'll be in a better state of mind.
Yeah,
But
you're absolutely correct. Let me just borrow a quote from the late Jerry Falwell. Jerry Falwell said, if he had the kind of people he wanted in every school board, on every county commission in the country, it wouldn't matter to him who the president was.
Mm.
Think about that one, because
wow.
decisions are made at the local level,
Mm-hmm.
and depending on where you are, you can make more influence at a school board meeting than you can in Congress. So we have to
Mm,
start. The challenge for USQs and for other groups, you have to start training people on how to run, how to win, and what their agenda should be once they get there. The problem is, so many times once we arrive, we forget who we are and where we came from. You
mm,
cannot have people who believe they're now in the club, because we will never be in the club
Mm.
unless the club is filled with people who look like us.
That's
So
good.
you got to have someone with the right mindset who understands that if Andrew Johnson had more confidence in himself and didn't kowtow to Southern planters, we would have land. Andrew Johnson ended Reconstruction and told all the Confederates who had fought against the Union,
Mm-hmm.
if you come to my house in Tennessee and say the right words, you can get your land back. Now, but for that act, our families would have generational wealth. Nothing ticks me off more than when I hear some Anglo person talk about this land that's been in my family for the last 9 generations, because I know that it would not have been in the family if they had not been able to get free land when our great grandparents could not get free land. And if Andrew Johnson had not given those traders the land back and end Reconstruction. So we got to know who we are and who we're dealing with and what's around us. But we got to have leadership that's clear on the mission. The mission is not for me to make myself wealthy. The mission is for me to improve the living conditions of my people. And as long as we have people who are about me, my, and mine leading us, we're going to continue to be in trouble. We got to have people who are focused on the group and not just the individuals.
That's right. That's right. That's right. That's right. Um, listen, and you said so much great things, especially how things have influenced what you've dealt with and how you've been able to sort of turn that and why you do what you do. And I love that. And so one of the last things we would love to get into is, with you being from Wilcox County, can you sort of talk about what does that mean for you and how has that blessed you?
Well, now remember, our ancestors were walked from North Carolina to Wilcox County back in 1830, I think is the year. And to be a Pettway from those roots, to see how God has enabled me to do something not just for Pettways, but for anybody who walked in the courtroom and had the right ideas about what people should be and how they should be treated. The one good thing about a district judge is in Alabama, a district judge can reduce a felony charge to a misdemeanor. So for us, it was important because so many of our young men and some women had felony drug charges that we were able to reduce to misdemeanor charges, not just to maintain a voting population, but to give those young people a chance to a life. Because once you have a felony on your record, your life and your income is going to be tremendously limited. So for me, being blessed with the opportunity to serve as a district judge in the county of my ancestral heritage and to treat the people who elected me 4 or 5 times, one time with 75% of the vote. And I had the opportunity to keep some of them from going. I think I only sentenced maybe 4 or 5 people to the state penitentiary in 32 years. We used community corrections more than anything else. One young man I remember sentencing was had killed a woman's only son, and he understood he had to go to prison. But after he asked me questions and I gave him answers and explained things to him, and the child who he killed mother talked to him, when he left out of the courtroom, he said, "Thank you, Judge Pettway," and went on to prison. So even when you have to do things that just wrecks a person's life, you can do it in a way that's respectful for them and respectful for the victim and the victim's family. So, I thank God for the blessing and for the opportunity to serve as a district judge in the Black Belt, because it just wasn't people in the Black Belt who came to our court. There was a guy on television who just loathes Donald Trump. His son was at the University of Alabama when I was working, and he came through our court, and so many other people who had had contacts far beyond Buckhurst County came to our court. But for me, it was given to people who knew me and encouraged me to this day. Having the opportunity to serve them and lighten their burden is the best thing that's ever happened to me. And I thank God for it.
That's awesome. That's awesome, awesome, awesome. Listen, I have thoroughly enjoyed tonight's conversation with you. Um, and I think you might be the third person fourth person I've spoken with in this conversation that I've grown up, I've known since I was a young boy, and I'm still learning so much more. And so this has definitely been enjoyable. Thank you so much again. As always, we just want to remind everybody, please follow our Facebook and Instagram at Omega Chi 1957. Subscribe to our YouTube channel at Omega Chi 1957. These videos are always up. Brother Boswell, I'm going to turn this over to you to close us out.
Can I just say one thing before you go?
You sure can.
You have your grandfather is a jewel, and I don't know if he's on here or not, but he should hold a class in a school for how to preach. and he can't nobody do it like him. And for I don't know if he will want to come on, but he has a story to tell that people need to hear, and that's the book you need to be writing.
Listen, it's hard to get him to sit down.
I know,
because he's always moving and he's always driving. We can't even tell him not to drive or to go anywhere, especially in COVID. He'll double mask and get in his car and just keep on going. This was even today. He pulled up in Selma today, and so it's hard to get him to slow down.
That's it. That's that real man. That's that real man. But what you don't understand is your grandfather can take a text and deliver a life-changing message without looking at the text.
And he can do it in 10 minutes.
And very few people can do that. And he doesn't, and just like he doesn't take all day. So thank you, Brother Bastilus, for the opportunity. It's just been a joy.
We want to show our appreciation, man. This has definitely been an eye opener to me because I lived in Wilcox. I lived in Wilcox for 2 years. It was definitely an eye opener for me. Place like that made me realize that so much has grown around us, and it makes me appreciate life as well because I was living in a car and it's nothing in the car, So I think those were the most peaceful 2 years of my life, just being
I
able to
can
think
imagine.
and and
You
prepare
were
my
in
life.
Troy?
Yeah, I lived in a car for like 2 years.
Ah,
And it helped me prepare. And a lot of times I thank God for that happening because without that peace, I probably wouldn't be where I am now. And I'm thankful for places like that to help me have grown into the man that I am now. And it's so overwhelming to see people like yourself who have a story, who grew up there, and they and like you bring so much to the table. Like it's really some stuff you haven't even told us. Like I know it's some stuff you
Somebody
really
can't
haven't
tell
told us.
you.
I believe that, and I'm just like, man, I know,
Mm-mm.
even with what you gave us, I was like, man, I know she got one just in the back pocket. I really just want you to just go on and throw it at the screen, but I know you can do it because even with every interviewer we've had, we've even said, man, we need to do a part 2 with everybody because it's so much more that so many individuals need to hear, like myself, younger generations. As a history teacher, man, I'm finna go find your bio in a minute and see what else I can find about you because I know that it's something about your life that I can say to a young lady or a young man that I'm teaching in the 8th grade that will help build a better future. And I appreciate you breaking down those barriers and dealing with that harsh time frame. Like I'm not built for it. Like I would have had to say something. I'd have had to, it's a song I said, don't try me, try Jesus. And and I'm a firm believer in that. So I don't think,
No,
I appreciate your generation of people because you were strong enough to know when to hold them, when to fold them, because I wasn't built like that. I'm
I
sorry.
have a,
no,
I have a
no,
whole level of respect. I have a whole level of respect for your
I
generation
ain't built like that. Like
because
somebody
some
like
of
no,
the things that you
no,
all went
no,
through.
no. No, see what you have to do. You say, under your breath, you say, "Oh Lord, I need you to help me.
would have been
Help
some
me
furniture
while I get
moving
to my gun." But let's
right
finish
after
this,
that
Brother
song. It
Bounce.
would have
Let me
been some
just say this
furniture
real
moving.
quickly.
Go ahead.
Continue loving your daughters and
Yes, ma'am.
continue telling them how important, how beautiful, how brilliant they are. Because when
Yes,
it
ma'am.
comes to choosing a husband, you are going to be the standard that they will judge all men by. I had a husband had to divorce me because he wasn't nothing like my dad. And I knew he wasn't nothing when I got him, but I just got him because I need to have a little footnote. But you make sure you continue loving your babies and hugging them and giving them what they need. So when it comes time to pick a husband, that's what my daddy, because that's what I say to this day. My dad's been gone almost 10 years, but my daddy said, and that's going to take them through. God bless
Yes,
you,
ma'am.
young
I
man.
appreciate that.
Nothing
We're
else to be
proud of
said.
y'all.
Yes, ma'am.
You said that.
Yes, ma'am. Gotcha. I appreciate you.
All right, Brother Basilis,
You have a good night.
take us out. Thank you all so much again. We appreciate all of you. You all have a blessed night, and we'll be back on Thursday.
Peace be the journey. See
Bless
y'all
them.
Thursday.